All right. Hey, y'all. This is Haley, and welcome to today's episode of Real, the unedited life of a Christian woman, where it's okay to not be okay and where you can find authentic connection with other Christian women. Make sure to follow me on Facebook and on Instagram. Our social media is currently in process, so we're working on it. It's not quite up to speed yet, but we're getting there. So be patient with us. So I had said last the last podcast that I did that I would do an episode on antidepressants. And so I want to honor that. And it has been a few weeks since I've done a podcast with Thanksgiving and Christmas and the crazy of life. It just got to be too much for a little bit, but I'm back. And we recently announced on Facebook that I'm going to have a co-host with me sometimes. Her name is Misty Hurt. She is a good friend of mine from high school. Well, from really since kindergarten or first grade, I would say. First grade, I think. Um, she is hilarious. She is a sweet Christian woman, and you all are going to absolutely love her. So I'm looking forward to recording episodes with her in the near future for you guys to take a listen to. So stay tuned for that. But today we're going to talk about antidepressants. I told you all I had some strong opinions on antidepressants, and I do. So I am a family nurse practitioner. Now I currently do telemedicine. I do weight loss visits all day long as a full-time job. Prior to that, however, I worked in primary care and I worked at a walk-in clinic. So in the primary care setting, definitely saw a lot of patients related to coming in to see me for anxiety and depression. So I guess I'll just start by telling my story behind, I guess, my journey with anxiety and depression. So I was in college, I'd say my junior year of college, and I was taking probably 18 hours a semester. I was engaged to be married. I was preparing a house for us to live in after we got married. I was also working part time, probably 20 to 30 hours per week. So I had a heavy, heavy load on me. And I got to where I couldn't sleep at night. And at the time, I was only in my very early 20s, but I could not make the connection as to why I couldn't sleep. My bachelor's degree is in healthcare administration. So I, at the time, had no experience in nursing and healthcare really. And as a young 20 something, I did not understand why I couldn't sleep. So, I just remember being so frustrated and anxious when I would lay down. I couldn't go to sleep. If I did go to sleep, I would wake up and not be able to go back to sleep. I was getting probably 2 to 3 hours of sleep at night. It was bad. I had no idea that underneath everything, I was dealing with anxiety and depression. No idea. I went to the doctor, and my complaint to my doctor was I can't sleep. Like, I can't not sleep. Like, I'm super anxious over the fact that I can't sleep. I have all of this stuff to do. I feel terrible during the day. I have such fatigue and I'm just exhausted and I have so much to do, but I can't sleep. And I remember the doctor, and I think we tried some different things, but at one point, she put me on Ambien. Now, at the time, I didn't know a lot about Ambien. It was fairly new drug at the time, I think. Um, I took it. It would help sometimes, but I remember being in class and literally not being able to keep my eyes open. And that was not like me at all. I remember that semester being a very difficult semester for me. So finally, I was doing research online, trying to figure out what in the world, why can't I sleep? What's wrong with me? And I came or maybe it was a magazine at the time. We don't see magazines that much anymore, but I feel like maybe it was a magazine because I remember it was an ad for a pharmaceutical company who had an antidepressant, and it had a questionnaire you can fill out for your doctor. And basically, it was a screening questionnaire, what I know now, for anxiety and depression. And so I filled it out. I took it to the doctor. I handed it to her. I don't know what I scored on it. I must have scored fairly high because I came out of the office with an antidepressant. I believe at the time she put me on Paxil. So that was the very first antidepressant I ever had. And let me tell you, it changed my life because all of a sudden I could sleep at night. I was in a much better mood. Now, there were downsides to the antidepressant, such as side effects and things like that. But overall, I felt so much better. Now, from that time, I'd say I was probably around 20, 21 when I went on Paxil. We're just being real here, right? So, the main side effect that I had with Paxil was decreased libido, okay? Like nada. Okay? And as someone getting married soon, that was kind of a big deal to me. Okay. So I switched antidepressants. I feel like I went to sertraline at one time, or the brand name of sertraline is Zoloft. I, at one point, was on Effexor, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I, at one point in my life, have been on bupropion, which is Wellbutrin, and we can talk about that. But I can't remember. I feel like I switched to sertraline to help. And, it was kind of bouncing back and forth among different antidepressants to see what works best for me. And as a little side note, there are tests out there that you can take to find out which antidepressant works best for you. They're not a common thing at primary care doctors. They're not a common thing that somebody will order. You can probably find companies online that do this, and it may cost you a little bit of money. Some insurances will cover it, but it could cost $200 or $300. I don't know. I haven't checked into it recently. But there are companies out there that will they'll send you a kit. They'll have you swab your cheek probably, and then you'll send it back to the company, and they'll send you a report back on which antidepressants, which anxiety medications are going to work well for you. I know one of them does like a red light, yellow light, green light. So green lights, all good for you. Yellow lights might work, but maybe not the best. Red lights, don't take those. They're probably not going to work well for you because we all metabolize medications differently. So just because one works really well for me does not mean that that antidepressant is going to work well for you. So on with my journey, I would say I was on an antidepressant until the time that I got or was trying to conceive our first child. I had mixed opinions at the time on antidepressants and pregnancy and the possibility of heart defects in the baby. And that was kind of what was out there at that time. And so I decided to come off of my antidepressants when I was trying to conceive and when I was pregnant. And so I did. I will tell you that was very, very hard for me. I did it because I felt like for me, that was the right choice at the time. Looking back, I don't know that it was because it was such a struggle for me while I was off of the medication. So with my daughter Ella, I was not on any medication. After I had her, not long after, I started back on antidepressants. Got pregnant with my son Tate fairly quickly. Like Ella was 5 months old, I think, when we found out I was pregnant with Tate. Oops. And then, so I may not have actually gone back on them. I can't remember, to be honest. And then obviously, after Tate was born, went back on them. Jackson came along, stopped them again for the pregnancy, and then restarted after Jackson was born. I'll say I mean, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys and real with you guys. When I came off of them for a pregnancy, there were times that I was scared because I felt unstable. And that's just me being completely honest. Like, I remember telling my husband one time, I don't feel right. I feel unstable and I'm scared. Please stay with me. I don't know that I would go so far as to say I was suicidal. I would say that the thought crossed my mind, that I was feeling that I was in such a state that I could have done something to myself. And so that was a really scary place to be. At one point, I remember being off of medication and calling my primary care doctor and saying, I don't feel stable. I feel unstable. I talked to the nurse and I didn't want to say that I felt suicidal. I just felt off and scared. And I think she realized what I was saying. They called me back not too long after that and said he had sent me in a medication to the pharmacy. And that was when he sent in Effexor. Now, Effexor for me ended up being not so good of a drug for me. It would probably be a red light if I was to swab myself, which I've never done, because I feel like Effexor caused an appendicitis in me. Some of these medications, they have different side effects in everybody. And when I was on Effexor, I was on it's a fairly strong antidepressant. And I was kind of on like a mid to high dose. And it pretty much like stopped my bowel movements for the most part. And not knowing anything about medicine at the time, I think it got to the point where I developed an infection in my appendix and it turned into an appendicitis. And the rest is history. I had to have my appendix out and all that good stuff. And to this day, I take antidepressants. I recently switched from sertraline. I was on sertraline 12.5 milligrams for years, talking years. And that's a very small, tiny dose, almost to the point where I thought, I don't know if I need this. But I tried coming off of it a few times and just didn't feel right. Felt very emotional, like just felt like I'm better on this, even though it's a tiny, tiny dose. I mean, I would go like pre-op for a surgery or like a colonoscopy or something, and the nurse would say, list your medicines. And I would say sertraline 12.5 milligrams. And I remember one nurse said, well, golly, you just lick it. Like you don't even, I said, I know. I said, but it helps. So I'm one of those people that I feel like everybody is different. So what dose works for me is not going to be the same dose that works for you, most likely. So, anyway, I recently started, oh, yay, perimenopause. With perimenopause comes hot flashes. And it was very strange for me because I'm used to being cold all the time. And this was very new to me. But with these hot flashes, so because of my background as a nurse practitioner, I was aware that one of the antidepressants, Paxil, has an indication. I don't know if it's an indication or if it's used off label for hot flashes. I feel like it's an indication for it. Not sure on that. But I wanted to try that because I felt like I had used Paxil in the past. It had worked well and see how this went. So right now I've stopped the sertraline and I'm on Paxil, very low dose of Paxil. But it's helping to control the hot flashes and it's also helping to control my mood. And so it's a good combination for me. So that's kind of my backstory. I'm sure we missed some things, but overall, throughout most of my life, I've struggled with anxiety and depression. It's always been a constant in my life, and it's something that has needed to be treated. And I will say this, there is a stigma sometimes surrounding um, antidepressants, anti anxiety medications, as well as even counseling sometimes. I feel like it's getting a lot better than it used to be, but it is still there definitely. And I feel like it's still there, especially in small towns. I'm not from a super small town, but it's not a large town either. We've grown over time, but it's it's still very much a stigma here in some places, in some people, and in some patients. So counseling has a stigma surrounding it as well, sometimes, not as much as it used to. But I remember back in 2013, we'll talk more about this throughout the podcast because it's a huge, huge thing in my life. My precious 8-year-old niece, Cheyenne, passed away suddenly in 2013. She, my sister went in to wake her up from school one morning and she was gone. We were shocked by the sudden loss. No idea what caused it. In hindsight, I have some feelings about it, but You can imagine that the sudden loss of a child, an 8-year-old child, not expected, is going to cause some major grief in a family. And it did. And so at that time, I sought out counseling and I was the aunt. So it was a huge, huge thing in our lives at that time. And I felt like I was constantly picking up pieces. I was kind of the person that was holding everyone together. And I needed an outlet too. And so counseling helped with that. I said in the last podcast that I have some strong feelings regarding antidepressants. And those strong feelings are that there is nothing wrong with taking an antidepressant. I see no difference in taking an antidepressant for your mental health. I mean, you're treating your brain. Your brain is an organ, okay? So let's say we're treating high blood pressure for your heart. Your heart is an organ. We're treating that. Diabetes, we're treating that illness. We're treating the body. We're treating these organs. There's no difference in treating your mental health versus taking medicine to treat any other illness. Your brain is a very complex organ. And I'll tell you, I recently even went so far as to schedule an online visit with a psychiatric nurse practitioner for myself when I was considering switching from sertraline to Paxil just to get her thoughts. And she told me she'd been doing this for, I don't know, 20 years. And she said she worked in neurology before she was a psychiatric NP. So she has multiple years of experience with just the brain. Neurologists look at the brain, okay, and study the brain. And she said there is so much we don't understand about the brain. And that's very true. But there are things that we understand as well, and how these antidepressants work on the brain to increase serotonin levels. And, it gets into a lot of things. There are different types of antidepressants. There are SSRIs, there are SNRIs, there are tricyclic antidepressants, there are anxiolytics, which is anxiety medications that just treat anxiety. There are benzodiazepines that we use, like Xanax and things like that are controlled. There are so many medications we have at our disposal to treat mental health. And another piece that I want to touch on is genetics and how much genetics plays a role in mental health, in my opinion. You know, I will say this, medicine does a good job, at least for the most part, from what I'm seeing in my current job, of screening mental illness, in doing GLP-1 medications, the injectable weight loss medications. We screen for different psychiatric illnesses as well. So there's schizophrenia, there's bipolar disorder, and those disorders are going to have different medications with those. In my own personal family, if you look back through the generations and just talking to my parents, there is a strong history of mental illness in the men on my mother's side of the family. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but there has been bipolar disorder, there has been schizophrenia, there has been suicide, there has been alcoholism. That's a very strong family history of some mental health issues. And I think if you look at your family and you see that and you ignore that, that's an issue, because there are so many things in modern medicine that we can treat now. Someone doesn't have to suffer. Medication can help in so many ways. And ultimately, it's a decision that has to be made by you, by the person that is, going to be taking the medication. But there are no, in my opinion, there's no reason why you shouldn't try something. If you're struggling, there are screening tools online for anxiety and depression. You can go on there. There's what we call the PHQ-9, and then there's the GAD-7. Um, it's GAD-7 that screens for generalized anxiety disorder, and then there's the PHQ-9. I know those seem odd names and numbers, but if you fill out that screening questionnaire and you can score yourself, it will tell you if you likely have mild, moderate, severe depression, mild, moderate, severe anxiety. And we even make recommendations based off of those, whether or not cognitive behavioral therapy would be good or medication would be good. I feel like, and ultimately it's a decision that you have to make personally. I personally feel like these medications help. And if you don't try them and you're struggling, why? I say give them a try. I think sometimes as Christian women, we're scared to talk about our mental health, and we're scared to talk to other Christian women about medicines that we take that are related to mental health, or if we have sought therapy, if we have been in counseling. We're afraid to talk about that because we are afraid of being judged. And I'm here to tell you, we should make that as normal as anything else. It's important to take care of your mental health, and it's important to be able to talk to your sisters in Christ about that too. I feel like overall, churches in general have not done a great job of making people feel okay in talking about mental health. I think it's definitely getting better. I think I feel like the stigma is starting to go away some, but you'll notice in our older generation that it's very much so still there sometimes. But I want to talk too about other factors that affect your mental health that are so important, not just medication, right? So, as a nurse practitioner, I've learned along the way a lot of other things that are super important to your mental health. So, like being outside. We are a society that spends a lot of time indoors. And I feel like God didn't necessarily create us to be inside. I mean, yes, we need shelter and that's important, but a lot of our lives, at least many years ago, our lives would be spent outside, hunting, food, gathering. They're just before we had technology, before we had all of these screens in front of our faces, we were outdoors a lot more. The sun is so important for so many things in your body. It's important for your mood. It's important to get vitamin D. We have a huge vitamin D deficiency in this area. And I mean, you've heard about people saying, "Oh, I'm taking vitamin D right now." That didn't used to be a thing as much. I feel like we spend so much time indoors that a lot of us are vitamin D deficient. And as a side note, if you're very fatigued, tired, no energy, get your vitamin D level checked. It's possible that you need supplemented, especially if you don't spend a lot of time outside. So the sun is so important. Friends and socialization is so important to us, having each other. And that's another reason that this podcast is so near and dear to my heart, is because we need to be real with one another when we meet, when we gather, when we talk with our friends, when we go and do things. Let's be honest with each other and what we're going through. There's no shame in that. We're all human. So there's, the social aspect, there's the sun, the food we eat. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. The American diet overall is pretty horrendous. I'm just here to say, and I'm as guilty as the next person of eating things that I shouldn't eat and eating things that are processed and eating because it's literally, we're inundated in our culture by fast food, eating out. Our lifestyles are so quick. We don't have time to cook. If we do have time to cook, we pick the easy things. What can we stick in the oven that was frozen? What can we put in the microwave? Forget having time to go to get vegetables and fruit and the farmer's market and the healthiest meat in town. We're at Walmart if we get a chance to do that, or we're doing Walmart delivery or whatever. Our lives make it very difficult to eat healthy. And not only that, the food is super expensive now. And so our society has set us up to fail, in my opinion, when it comes to eating healthy. And that's a shame because our entire body needs nutrients to function off of. If we are eating crap, we're going to feel like crap. I'm just being honest. If we're eating things that have no nutritional value, how do we expect our bodies to function at a level that is going to sustain us throughout the day? We're not. Okay. We're not going to feel good if we eat things that are unhealthy. We're just not, because our body has nothing to run off of. It's so much easier said than done. I can sit here all day and say eat healthy, but that's a lot harder than it seems. I've recently started changing my diet a lot, but it's a learning curve. Like, it has taken me years to find what works for me as far as eating healthy. And I don't always do what I should, but I mean, I've come a long way. And so I feel, I mean, I could talk about this for days too. Just as a little side note here, when I went to Vanderbilt, I stayed there my first year to get my registered nursing, my RN degree. Had to stay like in Nashville, which is a whole other thing. But one of our projects for one of our classes was we were in a group of 4, and there were 3 other girls and myself, and we had to go to 2 different grocery stores in Nashville. One was in Green Hills, and if you know Nashville, Green Hills is a very wealthy area. We went to a Kroger in Green Hills, and then we also went to a Kroger, and I don't remember which neighborhood we were in with that Kroger, but it was a low income area. Okay. And we had to compare the 2. And we had a sheet of just different things we had to do. But if you look at the Green Hills Kroger versus the low income Kroger, the number of healthy food choices, accessibility was crazy. At the Green Hills Kroger, you had so many more healthy foods. Now, granted, they were probably more expensive as well, but you had access to them, right? The low income Kroger, you go over there, the end caps were full of cheese puffs, processed cheese puffs, Lay's potato chips, 2 liters of Cokes, Pepsi. The end caps on the Green Hills Kroger were very, very different. Usually healthier options, organic options. They geared more toward health as opposed to what was cheap and easy. So in America, we're not giving our low income Americans a choice, really. I mean, they have access to that grocery store. That's what they're going to buy, right? So anyway, I could talk about that all day, but what we eat affects our mood majorly. All right. So in closing, I just want to say that everybody has a story with their mental health. Everybody has gone through major things in their life, most likely, and everybody reacts differently to those things. Okay. You can't control your genetics either. So there's no reason to feel ashamed over needing antidepressants, needing anti anxiety medications, seeking counseling. On the flip side, I think people should be proud of you, and you should feel proud of yourself for seeking those things, taking the time to take care of yourself because it's so important. I've said this before, you cannot pour from an empty cup, and you have to be okay in order to give your best to others, in order to serve. And I guess my prayer for you all is that we can talk to each other honestly and openly and be real with one another about our mental health, about our struggles, about taking antidepressants, sharing our stories with others. I pray that if you have been on the fence about this, that I can encourage you to make an appointment with your primary care doctor to seek help. There are even online options now, you guys. There are places like redbox.com where you can it's fairly cheap to make an appointment with a provider, see them online and for a telehealth session and get prescribed an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication. There are lots of places online where you can do that, and you don't even have to have insurance. Don't worry about not being able to get something, or if you don't have insurance, there are options, okay? Seek help. Also, my prayer for you is that you have peace and calm in your life. And I think that is so important. And most importantly, if you ever feel like harming yourself or others, do not be ashamed to call the suicide hotline. You can dial 988 at any time, 24 hours a day for help. It is not anything to be ashamed of. You should be commended for seeking help. You can get help. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope this has been enlightening for you. There is literally so much to talk about when it comes to antidepressants. Catch me on Facebook. The social media thing right now, we're figuring it out. We're doing Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I think that's it for now. But we're going to start adding more content there. Facebook is probably the one that's the most robust right now, and that's being generous. So soon, Misty will be joining me for some episodes, and you guys are going to absolutely love her. She is hilarious. I may not be able to get a word in edgewise with her, but she will have you all in stitches. She is so funny. So I can't wait for that. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if I can help you in any way, please reach out on Facebook. You can find our Facebook page. It's called Real with Haley. I'm so glad that you all have been here. Thank you for listening, and I hope this has been helpful to you.